Yeah, I've talked to a few different people, and one of the things we discussed is, the importance of different local artists. And Blazo is one of the people who's been an artist that's reoccurring when we talk about artists that's been able to reach some of the pinnacles here, and artists that's been able to break through certain barriers here, and artists that have been able to have music that's played in different areas here and that's recognized for making music. And I think that Blazo is like one of the people that's really important and impactful in the culture, not just simply because of some of the things that he's done with music, but even more so because of the things he's done outside of music that have, built platforms for artists and that have built platforms for the culture to grow. I think that that's one of the things that's really missing in the city, because the city hasn't had as much time as maybe other areas have had with music, is that the foundation of the culture, it takes a long time to build, and you have to find people who know how to exist outside of necessarily being the artist, outside of necessarily being the one that's putting music out, and I think that Blazo's done a good job of
shout out to Blaze,
putting together events and showing the importance of performing, and the importance of branding and imaging and stuff like that. Talk to me about because I've seen you do performances and I've seen you do different shows and stuff like that. Talk to me about what your performance experience has been like.
I remember like my first one was a school talent show. I wrote a song called "Follow Your Dream." It was my senior year of high school. Getting ready, graduate and stuff. So that's like no cussing, no profound language. So I wrote that song. I'll say it took me about like 2 days to write it. Third day I went to go record it. But when I went for my audition, I had it up on like a CD, and that's like it needs to be like the instrumental and stuff. But long story short, I made it. I made the list, and then I had one first place at Guilford, Guilford High School. Class of 2016 talent show. Then I went to All City. That was hosted at East High School. After that, that was my first performance. From there, and then after that, I went to America's Got Talent. They was hosting the auditions at the Potawatomi Casino up in I think Milwaukee. That's what it is. After that, I was just going harder. Ever since then, I had I think like 2 performances, with 2020 Empire. That's a group that I was in with Prez Zabe and Young Peso and Boss Man TG. But as far as that, like after I branched off and went solo, I started going up to Chicago and performing there.
And what was one of the things that I've also talked to different people about, because everybody that I've had on the platform so far, we've only had one conversation, and in each one of the conversations I've sort of touched on similar subjects and sort of touched on people's beginnings and their journeys and their creative process. And I've talked about how it's this transition you have from being somebody who's strictly listening to music and experiencing music to then becoming somebody that begins to create music, and how you begin the writing process, and you start off as a writing artist, and then writing music for so long, eventually get into the studio and you become a recording artist, and you have the experiences that come with being a recording artist and the journey that comes with being a recording artist, and then eventually you transform to being a performance artist, and you performing these songs that you were once just writing down in notepads and in pieces of paper. And in each one of those steps of the journey, it sort of changes the thing that you've done before. When you go from being strictly a writing artist to a recording artist, it changes the way that you write, when it's time to record in the future. When you go from strictly being a writing and recording artist to a performance artist, and you had the experience with performing, it changes the way that you write and then record, in the future. So talk to me about how
niggas gon' sell they soul for them Andrew Jacksons. Translate the culture for them crackers, that's the same transaction. From when they with you with them white folks, they gon' kick your back. And when the captain asks what happened, they get reenacted.
Go back broke, bitch, I'ma go fed. Trap it out like Jeezy, bout that loaf, cause I want more bread. Ain't no fucking up my motion, what you mean, let you hold 10. You bitches be embarrassing, I don't even hold hands, got the shawty all of my life.